Hey, welcome back to the channel. It's awesome that you're tuning in. In today's video, we are going to be doing a chit chat about this MSI gaming PC. Where I paid around, let's say, $100 for this. Yeah, it depends where you're going to be living and where you're going to be searching, because some of the resellers can ask a lot of money for this. However, I think it's quite interesting for gaming, but also when it comes to overall emulation performance, when it comes to, let's say, a full-size GPU built in. Like with the MSI Trident, there are different kind of models. However, this thing comes with a built-in drive. It's going to be fun if you're going to be installing Windows. However, for Batocera emulation, it's not going to be something that you're going to be needing. However, what I love about it is not also the very strange form factor that looks almost like a GPU, let's say, bracket. No, this thing is quite interesting when it comes to specs because of the Intel Core i5 in the inside, but also the NVIDIA GeForce GTX. And maybe we can do a little bit of tweaking and upgrading this machine in the future. So when we're going to be removing the case itself, it just reveals a full-size GPU. And I think that is one of the very appealing things to it, if you want to do a little bit of emulation with also upscaling. It comes with a very nice MSI GPU on the inside. It is going to be in GTX 960, so it's not going to be something super fast. However, it can be a performance booster if you're going to be doing upscaling when it comes to emulation. And tiny power supply, it also means that we do have some restrictions when it comes to upgrading. I mean, you can actually find these things. I think that's not going to be the biggest problem. It's just the complete output wattage. So when you're going to be using this, you cannot put in, let's say, an RTX of a very powerful card. Not only the space, but also the power that's actually going to be consuming. So if you want to do a little bit of a modifications or want to slap in a Batocera drive on just a 2.5-inch format like an SSD or a normal platter disk, this can be done fairly easy on top over here. But it also utilizes extra storage capacity options. So at the back we're finding an NVMe. This is going to be for Windows, but also when it comes to emulation, you can flash a Batocera to an NVMe if you have the tools and you can use it like that. Over here we're having the first module. This is going to be in total 16 GB if I'm saying it correctly. The first one is going to be over here. Oh, and the second one is quite difficult to show over there, but you can see a glimpse. The second one is over there, so not super convenient if you need to switch them out, but hey, we can actually upgrade it, and we do have dual channel. Very nice if you're going to be some emulation. But how about the emulation? So we can actually do two things. We can use Windows, and we're going to be using the Retrobyte drive. So I'm going to be slapping this on there, and we can actually use Windows combined with this, install all the needed files and actually all the drivers, and we can have a lot of fun. However, what I'm going to be doing today, I'm going to be using the Batocera drive. I'm not going to be using Windows at all. I'm going to be booting it up through Batocera Linux and just see how it will actually work through there. We can use this 3.0, let's say, drive, but also we can use itself, like, or just slap it out of the case and just put it on, let's say, the extra storage capacity there and boot straight from the SATA connection. But let's get into the Batocera. If you're going to be disabling secure boot, you can very easily boot into Batocera through SATA or USB. Going to be using the controller as the 360 because this is a very nice controller. I just love it, and it is compatible with Batocera. Very easy, plug and play. So let's plug in this bad boy, and I will show you that this image has been configured with the Batocera already. So next up, let's do a quick overview. So when it comes to playing emulation on this, there is absolutely a crazy amount of different kind of emulators we can use. However, we do have an i5 and a GTX 960, where it's not like the latest stuff, so we do have limitations. But let's get into the specs and let's do a chit chat about that, what we can actually do and what kind of specs do we have. It also shows how much storage capacity we're having. So next up we're having 32 Celsius idle, so it's quite good when it comes to the PC itself. So we're having the 6th generation i5, or also known as the 6400. We're having a max of 3300 MHz on the quad core, the 4 cores. So for the GPU power, we're having the GTX 960 full-size GPU. But I'm really curious how this will actually work out when we're going to be having upscaling with modern systems. So that is actually one of those things that I want to focus on, where all kinds of old school stuff like the Sega Genesis will run just fine on this. But we do have like a lot of different kind of devices, game boxes that can actually play that just fine. However, it's just an extra bonus, so you don't need to particularly buy a mini PC for those. However, with some systems, and I think that's the most interesting one, like PlayStations, how far we can push it, particularly when it comes to PlayStation Portable, PlayStation 2 and 1, And can we actually upscale? I think that is a very interesting question. And of course, we can also upgrade it. Look at the power supply inside the mini PC and what kind of, let's say, GTX card, maybe in 1060. It's going to be difficult to upgrade these things, but if you manage to do that, we have like more options then. But still, we're going to be using an old i5. But let's start off with some basic stuff with the Atari Jaguar. And yeah, we can actually emulate that on a PC like this without any problem whatsoever. I've seen it like on the cheaper game boxes, but most of them had a lot of issues, and we don't have that here. Atari Jaguar, I have the original system where Alien vs Predator and a couple of hidden gems are absolutely worth checking out. And yeah, if you don't want to get the Atari Jaguar, because this seems to be becoming very rare and very expensive now, particularly also when it comes to some of the games. Yeah, this is one of those games that are absolutely cool and fun to play. Moving on to the Panasonic 3DO. And I can tell you that I love playing this game. It's so much fun. I think the first time I actually played it was on the PlayStation 1, but the Panasonic 3DO is such a great system to actually return to fire. return to fire. Yeah, however, this is a very cool game where you can play alone or against each other. It's such a cool, fun game to play. I'm not surprised how good everything is mapped on the controller. But so far, so good. Great overall emulation with this, because the cheap game boxes are struggling a lot with this. Overall great system with many hidden gems. Through the Final Burn Neo emulator, we can just play all kinds of different old school games. However, if you want to get into old school games, you don't really in particular have this mini PC. The only games that will benefit from a PC are the Killer Instinct games, the Tekken MAME games. So those will not run on those cheap game boxes, but so far, most of the games, classic ones, will run just fine. But let's start off with some rendering resolution. By holding the A button with this particular Batocera drive, we can have the advanced game options. In here we're having all kinds of different options, different emulators, and in here we're also having rendering resolution. So native will run just fine, but let's see how far we can push it. Let's go to 1920 by 4040 and let's see how it looks and how it actually plays. So far, so good. Didn't have any dips, or at least in the gameplay. So when it comes to overall emulation performance, I think this has to do because we're actually using a way better GPU than the stock one. So where the newer generation of Intel are quite good when it comes to onboard, or at least good enough, we did have a lot of problems when it comes, let's say, upscaling, particularly when it comes to some of the systems. We don't have this problem whatsoever, but Atomic Wave was just a first try. We can also do a little bit of tweaking per game. Already I mentioned before, if you're going to be having the option to upgrade the GPU, we even have maybe the option to try out higher resolutions to make it more wicked than it already is. It's time to cruise through the USA with the N64 emulator, and well, it's going to be interesting to see how far we can push it. With a resolution of, I think it was 920 by 4040. Let's see how far we can push it and if the emulation itself is going to be great. Again, you need to do a little bit of tweaking between the games. Some of them are more demanding, so you can not push them that hard like the normal games, but even with some upscaling, you can do that without any problem whatsoever. And N64 seems to be running just fine on some higher resolutions. So that's just great. And this is one of the reasons I actually picked up this mini PC. For the money, it's absolutely steal. Maybe for modern games it's not going to be a good thing, because you do have a lot of limitations. But you know, out of the box, you can do a lot of cool just emulation with this and upscale modern games. And for that money, I think it's just an absolutely great deal. But let's move on. But let's go, let's do some more rendering resolution with GoldenEye 007, and then let's see about pushing it to the 2880 by 2160. Just do something wicked, let's boot it up and let's see how that actually runs. So let's see how this will actually hold up with this old specifications. And where I did see some minor dips going to 25 frames per second. And overall it's not bad itself. The parallel emulator with this specification, the i5 and the GPU, we have some surprisingly good overall performance. And this is just one of those many reasons I love these old PCs, particularly we're going to be picking them up. And where you can find them, that is of course depending where you're living, because where I have a lot of, let's say, old CPUs, GPUs, but also mini PCs I can pick up for not a lot of money. Maybe you need to look into thrift stores, shops, you know, or marketplaces where you can buy these old crappy PCs that nobody wants, but they're not as crappy if you're going to be getting into emulation. And just randomly shooting stuff. Does it explode? Yeah. Yeah, that's what I wanted to see. Yeah, so it does struggle, so you can do a little bit of tweaking to get a little bit better overall results. But let's move on to some GameCube emulation on 4K rendering resolution. Sometimes you need to play a little bit through a couple of games just to see which game needs what settings. Where F-Zero GX isn't a very demanding game, but out of the box it really seems to be running quite well. I did have like a dip to 40. 50, I think you cannot really read the frames per second because it's quite small on the right top corner. Where it does dip, the overall performance for this old combination is just amazing. But move on to another game, SSX Tricky. Oh man, I've been playing this game so many times on my place too. However, this is GameCube emulation with 5K rendering resolution. We're even going to be pushing it a little bit further than with the previous game. Take note that it is less demanding, what I understand, of the F-Zero GX game. But I've been playing around with it. Did notice that we did have a little bit of a struggle in some parts of the game. You can see that it struggles there. And when it's actually going to be getting up on my snowboard, it struggles big time. So that's quite unfortunate. So far, 5K is just way too much. Well, we do have some overall good parts of the game. You can just actually hear and see that it struggles big time. Here we go again. So 5K rendering resolution is just going to be way too much for this combination. Let's do one jump. Woo! Yeah! Flycast emulator 4K rendering resolution. With this setup, let's see what happens. And we're hitting 50. So I think we do need a little bit of tweaking. Oh no, I think it's going to be having enough speed. So performance-wise, 4K rendering resolution is quite nice to see that going on over here. I wanted to see actually some explosions, because those rendering will take sometimes the frames per second down. But when it comes to the performance, I think it's quite nice. We do have a lot of options now to actually play on Dreamcast, but not on the 4K rendering resolution. Oh! But let's get into the Sega Saturn 4K rendering resolution, and in combination with this GTX 960, this is not going to be a problem whatsoever. So I think that is quite nice. But let's do a little bit more gameplay, and maybe let's try also a different game with different emulators. The Yawa Shiro is still one of my favorites to use with these things. However, I did notice that the audio sounds always kind of, let's say, dim compared with all the other, let's say, emulators. So I think that's the biggest problem with these things. So I've been checking out some Sega Saturn with different kind of mini PC solutions that are cheaper than this one, that have most of the time an onboard GPU, and some of them do have the actually option to also play this in 4K. But you need to really just to check out what kind of onboard CPU-GPU combination they're having. Another game I just wanted to check out is some Daytona. With simple reason, because I did notice a lot of struggles on many mini PCs where it had an overall great performance with many games where Daytona was absolutely a nightmare to emulate, but so far so good. I'm almost like somehow I was messing around with the controllers when actually starting into the game. But so far also here 4K rendering resolution is no problem whatsoever. So yep, we can just actually play these games, enjoy them. But let's go with the flow with one of my favorite systems, the PlayStation 1, having the dock station combined with 4K resolution. Yep, and let's see. If it's going to be having a stable 60 frames per second. This is one of those reasons I love PC emulation and Batocera. Of course, you can also use Windows with the front end and different emulators. But I just love the convenient part about Batocera, and having the option to do upscaling with such a basic old GTX 960. I'm still flabbergasted about the overall performance, what you can just do with it. We did see some GameCube emulation, and that had a lot of, let's say, struggles if you're going to be putting it to the maximum level. So therefore we're going to be needing more GPU and also maybe some CPU power. But so far for this old machine, I'm quite surprised. 4K rendering resolution again with the PlayStation 2 emulator and Tekken 5. And we do have this very strange lines that has to do with the upscaling option. But I just wanted to showcase what you can do. But I find it quite interesting to see how far we can even push it with the PlayStation 2 emulator. So what is very convenient, so if you're having not the option to buy the same kind of MSI mini PC, you can also get yourself an old, let's say, big, massive case with the same CPU or GPU in it for a fraction of the money. Let's finish it. Okay, he's not going to let me win, isn't he? Nope. Woohoo! But let's try another game, and this time we're going to be having an old school time with the Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3. Rendering resolution 4K is just going to be looking amazing. I also played this on the PC where we have some resolution upscaling, or at least a different resolution option, but it doesn't even come close to this particular, let's say, upscaled emulation version. PlayStation 3 is one of those systems that is a hit or miss, because we do need a lot of, let's say, CPU power for actually having the option to play this. Where the Ridge Racing game is a kind of small game, so it's going to be loading up very quickly, but bigger games are going to be taking forever. But the speed itself, you can just see that it loads quickly for a smaller game. But let's get into the gameplay and see if we can actually play something of the PlayStation 3 emulator. And getting into the game, it automatically freezes. Trying to compiling some shaders. It went better than the previous video I've made with some mini PC, but this happens, you know? This just happens. So let's move on to the next game. Yeah, because this doesn't work, obviously. But let's get into some gameplay with the Castlevania game, because that seems to be actually booting up. Overall emulation performance seems to be not bad at all. So this is more like a compatibility issue. Yeah. This is just kind of cool to see that we can just play a couple of PlayStation 3 games. I don't see a lot of syncing going on in the left bottom corner that we have seen with the previous game. So the game is going to be a hit or miss. But I think for PlayStation 3, if you want to have like the best overall performance, we just need to have way more power. So we can play every kind of game on this. But what you can play on this is absolutely awesome. With PlayStation Portable, let's go to the maximum mode with the 10 times resolution. And it seems to be that the PC is handling it quite well. However, you do see 100% on the right top corner with some frame dip. So I think with the God of War, we should do an overall tweaking, maybe lower to 9 times or 8 times if it's needed. Or we do have like some minor dips here and there. You can see like 37. But getting through the game, it seems to be working just fine. So when it comes to playing, I was pressing start to skip it, but You can just see that we have an overall great performance. The PlayStation and all the other systems, we have so many great games, but PlayStation Portable has those mini games. PlayStation Portable, I love them for that. However, you can just see two-dimension games on the 10x resolution. It's not going to be an issue, and there are a lot of them that seem to be running just fine. So far out of the box, this is going to be a blast to the past with the Jetpack Joyride, because this is such a cool game. Woo! But when you're looking at some Xbox Classic, also this is a system that seems to be running fine, but do play it on native resolution. But out of the box, it seems to be working just fine. Of course, depending on what kind of game you're going to be playing, and we have seen this running on very basic boxes or mini PCs. So with a PC like this, I'm expecting to have a little bit more tweaking option and overall better support with different kind of games. We're having so many different other models and different kind of PCs and other different kind of platforms. The overall performance is quite good, and I'm really surprised by it. Seriously, like when you're looking at this old PC, we can play so many cool things, even some Doom. Yeah! And I think that is one of those cool things that we can do with Batocera. So, a mini PC that we're having over here. So the MSI Trident, I do wonder how you can pick them up, because did they sell them in every single country? I know they also have the Trident 3 that has even better specifications, like having a 7th generation i5, i7 and a GTX 1060. But this combination where I paid like a freaking like $100 for, this absolutely a good deal for emulation. You can see we can push out so many devices to the maximum, and this is just really crazy.